The dark-haired gypsy gazed deeply into Frederick's eyes, biting her bottom lip. You're so cute, handsome." Frederick laid under a thickly padded blanket, entranced by her deep hazel eyes, grinning ear to ear in high spirits from hours of pre-tournament workout. She kissed his neck, making her way down to his chest, then threw the covers to the side and walked naked to a painted metal table. Frederick stared at her curves as the sweat dripped from her body, reflecting in the candlelight. The other girl, still caressing his side, traced her fingers up and down his chest while softly kissing him. The hazel-eyed gypsy grabbed 2 steel goblets from the table and filled them to the brim with red wine. She returned to the bedside, then sat beside him, leaning against the headboard, and leaned in, pressing the cup to his lips. "Drink this, my love." I really shouldn't have any more." He replied much more confidently than before. "I have to compete tonight." The blonde gypsy lowered herself down his chest, gazing up at him with emerald green eyes shimmering in the candlelight. "Oh, just 1 or 2 more with us won't hurt, will it?" she asked pitifully while reaching to his groin and massaging him slowly. Frederick gulped, growing stiff from her soft strokes. He was unable to find his words. She smiled at him, staring deep into his eyes, breathing heavily as she squeezed her hand tighter, tugging at him faster. He groaned, then closed his eyes as his body tensed. The blonde gypsy continued for a moment, then threw one leg over his waist and climbed onto him. She slowly ground her hips back and forth, softly moaning with each motion, careful not to let him slip in. The other removed the drink from his mouth and placed it on the bedside table. She then slowly ran her fingers through his thick blonde hair, softly kissing his neck, then put 3 fingers in her mouth, covering them with saliva, and traced them down her front, spreading her legs. She slowly slipped her fingers in between her lips, gently sliding them in and out while moaning in his ear. After a moment, her body clenched, and she whimpered in his ear and then removed her wet fingers. Staring into his eyes, panting, she put them in her mouth, sucking the moisture from them, then went back to pleasuring herself. She leaned in, licked his ear, then muttered seductively, "Stay with us, baby, please." Frederick had never been seduced like this before, or ever for that matter. As much as he wanted to meet Thrane again, he could not resist their temptation. He muttered, then inhaled deeply. "Well, I suppose a few wouldn't hurt." The blonde on top bit her lip, then smiled. "Just a few more gold pieces, and you can have me until it's your turn to compete." The dark-haired gypsy then leaned in close. She ran her drenched fingers down his groin, then firmly gripped his shaft. She slipped him halfway into the girl on top, careful not to let him fully enter her, then whispered into his ear. "And then all night after." The gypsy on top placed one hand on his chest, then arched her back, slipping him in and out of her slowly while using the other to caress her breasts. The other girl released Frederick, letting him slip deep into her, then slipped her finger in between the 2 of them, pleasuring the blonde while she teased the young man. Frederick shuddered, letting out a deep sigh. Then he reached to the side table, grabbing a trembling fist full of gold coins from his coat while muttering something inaudible. The 2 girls grinned softly, then began kissing, slipping their tongues together around their heavy breaths. He gasped, then let his head fall back onto the pillow. After a few moments, the dark-haired gypsy leaned to the side table, grabbed the goblet, and put it to Frederick's lips again. He quickly gulped down half the wine and turned his attention to the sweat-covered blonde on top, who was now thrusting her hips back and forth wildly. The amber-eyed gypsy then finished the goblet and tossed it to the floor. She grabbed Frederick's hand, spreading her legs once more, then placed it over her lips, letting him explore her, moaning excessively with each slight movement of his fingers. Miles away from the bustling festival in Thortica, across the great grass-covered plains, a long, rocky mountain range stretched to the clouds. Perched high on a jagged ledge, jetting from the peak of one of the many gray mountains, stood a dark figure looming over the endless plains. Draped in a black and purple cloak, a long, white-haired dark elf peered through a black spyglass, grimacing over the city, his teeth clenched in anger. He collapsed the spyglass and examined the bright speck of light in the vast darkness with his bare eye. He stood motionless in the cool wind, wisping from the cliffside in deep thought. A few moments passed before he averted his gaze to a cave entrance in the cliffside.